The title of tonight's presentation is Imaging the Total Eclipse by Don Selle. So I'm going to read a little bit off the teleprompter here, so forgive me for that. But on April 8th, 2024, many locations within the state of Houston will experience a total solar eclipse. It's an awesome natural event that should not be missed. While the eclipse will not be total in the Houston area, traveling somewhere within the state to experience totality is very highly recommended. 99% eclipses nowhere near as breathtaking as totality. So y'all remember back in early October we had the Ring of Fire. This promises to be even more amazing. So many eclipse observers want to photograph the event. Eclipse photography can be challenging, but with a little know-how and the right equipment, even first-time eclipse observers can safely photograph the eclipse with great results. Don Selle successfully photographed the August 2017 Great American Eclipse. It was his first and so far only opportunity to photograph a total eclipse, and this experience forms the basis of this presentation. In addition, new and updated information on equipment and processing will be covered. With good preparation and a bit of practice, everyone with basic photographic skills can image a total eclipse. This talk will cover everything a first-time eclipse imager should know and provide you with suggestions for equipment and image processing necessary to help you successfully image the Great Texas eclipse. Our speaker tonight, since 2003, Don Selle has been an avid amateur astronomer, astro-imager, and HAS member. Starting out with only a basic knowledge of photography, he has learned the ropes and has become a competent astrophotographer and nightscape imager. I think competent's a bit of an understatement. After 20 years of learning the craft, he is still striving to complete the perfect astro image that knocks the socks off of those who view it and wins multiple awards. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to our very own Don Selle. And let me unshare my screen. And Don, you should be able to share your screen. And
we'll... Okie dokie, I should be. Let's see, here we go. All right, let me get up to the top here. Yep. Thanks for the introduction.
Hey, and, Don, before you get too far down the road, let me just say the following. If you would please make sure you're muted during the presentation. And if you have any questions, please put your question in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, I'll come back and we'll go through the questions for Don. And I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So, I'm sorry, Don, the floor is all yours.
Oh, okay. Let me start out by saying thank you for having me. I'm going to do my best to at least get you all at least started on what it takes, understanding what it takes to photograph the Great Texas Eclipse. It's really not that hard. The big thing is learning what you need to do, learning what equipment you need, then practice. There are ways you can practice before the event that make you more likely to be successful. Hopefully, by the time we get to the end of this presentation, I'm actually going to ask you to decide whether you really want to image the eclipse or not, and we'll talk about that later. But what types of eclipse photography are there? There's quite a number of them. We're going to focus on wide field images of the eclipse, and then basically using a tracked camera with a lens or a camera on the back of a telescope, how you do the close-up image of the corona. I'm also we're going to talk about the equipment as well, pros and cons, and then I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to processing your images. And I have to be upfront with you here. I realized by the time I was getting this presentation put together, a brief introduction was going to be really thin soup, if you will. So I'll talk about how I can fix that for you after this after this presentation. I'm sorry. So let's go to the next slide. Here's the objective. I want to help you complete this image, or if you envision a different landscape image with the eclipse, how to do that. And this is what I did in 2017. We were at Wyoming at the Jackson Hole area, and I actually put this image together probably 8 hours after the eclipse was completed. So I'm going to mention a lot of resources. There are going to be websites, various other things, and I want to make sure that y'all have the opportunity to get them. It's going to be kind of hard going through the presentation for me to get them all to you. So what I've done, and we'll talk about it at the end of the presentation, I've got a Dropbox folder that I will share PDFs of most of the material and URLs, et cetera, that I use to develop this presentation, so that you get a head start without having to do a lot of searching. So obviously, I've got to start out here with a bit of eclipse safety. It's the right thing to do. We don't want anybody to end up harming their vision or whatever. So you really need to save your eyesight and follow the guidelines I'm going to give you here. I'll go through them fairly quickly, because your eyesight really is irreplaceable. So what we have here, it's the phases of the eclipse, partial phases, the total eclipse here. Can you see my? It's not doing my laser. Here we go. The total eclipse here and the partial phases after the total. Whenever we're in the partial phases, you must be using a solar filter, and we'll talk about that as we go through the presentation here. Never look at the sun through an unfiltered optical device. Guaranteed to give you a problem with your vision and possibly blind you. So, next slide. Okay, eclipse observing, eclipse glasses, and you have to appreciate. Right now, everybody's gearing up and starting to purchase eclipse glasses. So the quicker you get into the market, the lower the prices are going to be, and the more likely you're going to get ISO-approved glasses. You want to make sure that any eclipse glasses that you use for yourself or give to anybody else to use are ISO-approved. There are lots of filters for optics as well, and they're pretty readily available through the astronomy companies, people that sell astronomy gear, manufacturers, and also through camera shops. My favorite one, well, anyway, B&H is my go-to camera store in New York City, and you can get just about anything there. So if I go back here real quick, you can see we've got photography filters, you've got universal solar filters, and then you've got specific filters for that are designed for specific telescopes. There's several different styles but for binoculars and cameras. This one in particular is made for a specific Celestron telescope, and it fits right into the end of the OTA. So moving on. You can also get solar film, which is ISO certified, and you can use it to make your own filters. As you can see over here, This person has some solar film on a pair of binoculars, and again, as long as it's the ISO approved solar film, you're good to go. Put it on the end of a spotting scope. Use it for a camera lens, whatever. But I need to point out to you, one of the major suppliers of this is Botter Planetarium, and they actually make two types. One that's suitable for visual use, which is in the blue package, and the other one doesn't dim the light of the sun nearly as much, and it's really only for photo use. You don't want to be looking through this. So if you're going to go the film route, make sure that it's for visual use. One other thing forgot to point out, you have these solar photography filters over here that go on the end of your lens or whatever. Make sure that those filters reject UV and IR radiation from the sun. That's the safest type. You can also get the filters for camera lens that screw in to the end of the lens. These are examples here, or those, I call them push-ons. There's all different designs of whatever it is that holds the filter. Some of them are glass with aluminization on them. Some of them are the film, like I was showing you. And if you want to get a good pickup on what filters you should have for your camera, for your telescope, for solar photography, they have a buyer's guide at B&H Photo and Video, and there's the URL for that. Oops. Okay, with this, I'm gonna get out of presentation mode, and we're going to look at a little video here, and if hopefully everybody will be able to hear it and see it.
Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to teach you how to photograph the upcoming annular eclipse.
This is the wrong one.
And this is going to be a bit different than the total eclipse that many... This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Welcome back. This is the second part of my series on preparing to photograph. This video is sponsored.
Here we go. Sorry, technically challenged here. Here we go. Can everybody see this?
The eclipse coming up. There's a lot of hype.
You're stuck on the presentation. We don't see the video.
Yeah, there's no video, Don.
There's no video?
No, I mean, we've got the still shot like we saw before, but the video's not playing.
Okay, so let me go back over to resume share, and
I think you were sharing a separate screen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I was. Okay. Okay, I should be sharing this one now, I hope. Okay, can you see
that? There we go. You got it. Yeah.
All right.
It's already focusing, and you're going to see that this is going to melt plastic or whatever, and you don't want it melting your retinas. So now I'm going to do a 6-second shutter. Just see what it does to the sensor. It's probably just burning the sensor right now. Let's take a look. Woo-hoo. If you didn't catch that, it was smoking when it came off. Oh yeah, the mirror doesn't even flip up all the way now. And you can smell the plastic burning. So we're gonna stick a paper clip in it to hold it up. So this is what happens with the shutter closed if you even just try and point your camera with the lens up at the sun. This thing is like totally just melting. So the moral of the story is, if you don't have the right filters and you're not a professional, don't try and shoot the eclipse. Just enjoy it with friends and family.
You're in copper now, though. You're probably not going to go any deeper than that.
Okay, I hope you all got the point of that. I really hope you don't end up in a situation where you're going to either damage your equipment or damage your eyesight. So we'll kind of leave it at that now. I got to figure out how to get my share back. Okay, here we go. I think this should work. Okay, you should be seeing my PowerPoint screen now, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay, good. And I got to swap the screens. Okay, so I ran across that. That was actually made for the 2017 Eclipse. You can tell that Rebel XT was an old camera back then, so that no good working cameras were sacrificed for that demonstration. Okay. Besides Eclipse safety, you're going to want to make sure that you plan your Eclipse experience. Believe me, it's a big factor, especially if you want to do photography. It's having everything very well planned and organized is a big plus to your potential success. So you need to keep in mind several things. You want to select where you're going to be doing your observing. You want to be, if you can, you want to be somewhere on or near the center line. You also want to be aware of the risk of bad weather, and also you want to approach this so that you keep in mind the potential for heavy traffic. A couple of resources. There's a real nice interactive Eclipse map and a website called Eclipsophile that does climate studies for the actual eclipses. So this is the interactive Eclipse map, and literally I just took a screenshot of this. This is the path of totality through Texas, and if you'll notice, it's nowhere near Houston, but it does go through Fredericksburg. It goes through the absolute center of the hill country, and then on up west of Austin and Dallas. What you see on this side is actually, you can zoom in. It's like Google Maps. And what you're seeing is my house in the hill country. I actually live right about here between New Braunfels and San Marcos. And where I'm at, it's not actually on the center line, but I'm going to have almost 2 minutes and 40 seconds of totality right in my front yard. Very lucky that happens. So for me, the planning is plan on a party for all my neighbors and friends, and figuring out how I'm going to manage that and do the eclipse imaging I want to do at the same time. For you all, where are you going to stay? The places are filling up now, so you need to think pretty quickly about where you want to go for accommodations. And this interactive map is a big help for that. Also, what's the average cloud cover? Well, if you're really an eclipse chaser, and I think George Ellis is going to be speaking to us tomorrow night about more eclipse observing rather than imaging that I'm talking to. He'd tell you that you're going to be in the desert in Mexico. Okay, this graph shows the average cloud cover along the center line of the eclipse all the way along. Texas isn't too bad. And the nice thing about this Eclipsophile website is that they have write-ups for various locations along the center line in terms of what to expect for weather, how it develops, etc. Okay, so once you decide where you're going to go, you need to decide how you're going to observe and what you're going to image. And depending on what decisions you make in terms of observing and imaging, it's going to have a huge impact on what equipment you're going to want to pack and bring with you. The picture here is a couple friends of mine who went with us on the 2017 eclipse, and I'll show you a little bit more of our setup later. But what we have here is a set of 20 by 80 binoculars with white light filters on them. So things are, what are you going to use to do the photography with? What mount? Are you going to need power? And then, are you going to set up the day of, or are you going to have the opportunity to set up a couple of days ahead of time? And then this is a long event. It's going to take at least 3 to 4 hours to observe the whole eclipse. So you're going to need to think about creature comforts, and then packing and getting there. How do what are you going to do? So this is some various pictures. There were 12 of us that all shared a condo in Teton Village, and all of the equipment is mine. I had a telescope, a 90 millimeter refractor on a German equatorial mount. I had my 300 millimeter telephoto lens and camera on a star tracker, and we were at the Teton Village. It's actually a ski resort. We were about a half a mile away from 3,000 people standing in the parking lot or sitting in the parking lot to view the eclipse. We had an awesome spot because I spent the time on Google Earth trying to figure out where we were going to set up. It was right next to the road and all. So that's the sort of planning that you can do to make your observing trip really special. Okay, and I want to make you aware of Sperling's 8-second law. Every total eclipse, no matter how long, seems to last only 8 seconds. Now, when I first got involved in astronomy, I heard this from many seasoned eclipse observers, and I didn't believe it. But I'm here to tell you it is true. While we had 2 minutes and 30 seconds of totality in Wyoming, I can tell you for a fact that it went so quickly. You get so emotionally wrapped up in the eclipse and what's going on, what can I see, etc. It means that you don't really want to miss that, having your eye in a camera viewfinder. By the way, Norman Sperling is a guy that published and edited John Dobson's book on how to make Dobsonian telescopes and do sidewalk astronomy, and it was published back in 1979. So, So I really have to ask the question, and you have to answer it yourself. Do you really want to image the eclipse? The truth, the matter is that you saw I had a telescope and a camera and lens combination set up to do the eclipse imaging. I came away. I was very lucky to get this image. My telescope setup didn't work the way I wanted it to, and Believe me, I initially started to try and adjust it and fix it, and I went, heck no, I only got a few more minutes. The camera and lens combination was set up to run automatically, and thankfully it worked. So again, if you're technically inclined and are able to do automation for your Eclipse imaging, think about that, practice it, etc. You'll have a good potential of getting a great shot, and also enjoying everything about the total eclipse experience. Just a last push for use ISO certified solar filters on all your optics, and don't be that person who burned up a rental 500 millimeter telephoto lens. After 2017 Eclipse, there were several things on social media from camera rental places that were showing dead telephoto lenses because somebody didn't do what they were supposed to. Automation software, I'll get into this a little bit later. There are two major automation software programs, Eclipse Orchestrator for Windows and Eclipse Maestro for iOS. And then, again, you're going to hear me say this, practice on the sun using a solar filter. You can also practice on the full moon because it's about the same size as the sun. It's not quite as bright, but it'll give you a good idea. Set your equipment up, figure out how to focus, what exposure settings you need for the partial phases, and the more you practice, the more likely you're going to be successful imaging. Okay, Eclipse with a smartphone, Eclipse photos with a smartphone. Normally I would have initially said, hey, you know what? If you're going to do this kind of photography, you may want to do something different than. The smartphone is good for recording what's going on around you, etc. But honestly, after doing a little bit more research, the newer smartphones are actually pretty capable. You can certainly do a wide field image of the eclipse, and I'll show you an example of that. But basically, you're taking regular timed images of the partial solar eclipse with filters. You're going to put the phone on a tripod. To do that, keep it stationary because you're going to eventually, for totality, take the filter off, put it back on after totality, and you can make a very nice photo, composite photo with that. Also, our smartphones now have this panorama capability, which is really awesome, and you're probably going to want to do that during totality because you're going to have the sky around you. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. You can also take videos of people and the environment around you during totality because they're really good keepsakes of your eclipse experience. So the thing you're going to want to stay away from, though, is if you want to take pictures of partial eclipses, stay away from digital zoom. You really only want to use optical zoom only. If your smartphone has a telephoto lens on it, use that. And again, tripod. That's a key thing. For Corona close-up, you might be able to get acceptable results, but older phones, that's going to be really tough. Just to give you an idea of some of the solar filters, this one in particular is called the Snap. It's on there very nicely with Velcro. these ladies over here have actually taped solar film over their camera. I wouldn't recommend doing this for several reasons. One, you got to use both hands and everything's jiggling around. You're going to have to manually focus your smartphone, most likely. And if you're jiggling everything around, that's going to make it very difficult to do. So get a snap-on or a solar filter. Here's a couple. Like I say, this one's made to put on the to affix to the phone. This snap one comes with the Velcro, and it actually also has an app for your phone that helps you set the exposure level and focus, so you don't have to dig in through the menus in your camera setup. And then again, remember about the solar film. You could do a DIY solar filter for your smartphone. There's a lot of other things that the smartphone is really good for during the eclipse. One of them is these, as the eclipse is in the partial phase, any small round hole or sometimes just the way leaves go together will actually project a shadow of the sun that shows the partial eclipse phase. So this is I may be this guy by the time the 8th of April comes along, but have some fun with it during the partial phases. As I mentioned, if you've got an older phone and it doesn't have a good telephoto lens on it, you may want to see about getting a telephoto snap-on telephoto lens for your phone. You also need to keep in mind that you're going to have to put a solar filter over that. And just a couple of examples of those. I actually think if you've got a telescope available on a mount, this is probably the best way to use a smartphone. You get a smartphone adapter, and there's several out there that are quite sophisticated, so that to help you put the camera on the phone in just exactly the right position. Put it on the back of a telescope. Put a filter on the front end of the telescope. When it comes time for the total phase, you should be able to take images with several different exposure values and perhaps put something together. Then there's always a total selfie. Take a total selfie. I got this image off of Fred Espernak's Mr. Eclipse website. And the reason why is that even though I had brought my good old point and shoot camera out with me and had an intervalometer on it, somewhere in the course of events it got kicked over, and and my total selfie was a total bust. So okay, so eclipse photos with a camera, DSLR or a mirrorless camera. As I mentioned earlier on, I wanted to focus on two particular types of images: a wide field eclipse image, and is the first one. And what do I mean by a wide field eclipse image? I'm going to show you this first, and then we'll go back to that slide. This is what I'm talking about. We have a nice landscape in the foreground, and we have images of the partial eclipse that have been shot through a solar filter. This particular one was the Ring of Fire eclipse that we just recently had, because it never did get the corona out. But what we'll see in April is instead of these really small crescents here, you actually will take the solar filter off your camera, and you'll shoot the corona. So let me go back a little bit here. The question is, what focal length of lens should I use for this type of a wide field image? And fortunately, this table came from Mr. Eclipse, Fred Espinak's website, where he's listed the field of view for various lens focal lengths for both a full frame camera, which is a 36 by 24 millimeter sensor, or a crop sensor, which is typically 24 by 18, I think. Anyway, it's like 2/3 of the size of a full frame. Okay, well, that's great. I know the field of view for the various focal length lenses, but what do I need for that? Well, if you go to either a planetarium program, I have one that I use pretty regularly, and simulate the eclipse, you're gonna realize that in central Texas, and actually all the way up mostly to Dallas, the sun during the partial phase is going to start when the sun is in the southeast at 138 degrees azimuth, and when the whole thing finishes, it will be in the southwest at 225 degrees of azimuth. So it will actually go through. Totality will occur almost due south at 181. So there's 87 degrees of the travel in azimuth that the sun will do. Well, in order to get 87 degrees, I'm going to have say, for example, a 11 to 14 millimeter lens on a crop sensor camera. 11 millimeters will give you a much nicer, wider field for your landscape. 14 millimeters will get everything in, plus a little landscape, and should work well. There are a lot of zoom lenses out there for crop sensor cameras that go in this range. Why not? For a full frame camera, you're really looking at 20 millimeters or 24 millimeter lens on a full frame. Now, if you decide you want to do 14 millimeters, that's fine too. That'll work. Just realize that you're probably going to have to crop your landscape when everything's said and done. Okay, we talked about this. So how do we do this? You shoot all your subframes in camera raw format. The camera needs to be on a tripod and pointing. You may want to center it in azimuth about due south. I forgot to mention. Let me go back. The sun in Texas will start at around 58 degrees high in the sky and end about 61 degrees. So it's not going to move up too far. This previous slide that I showed you, it's actually moving quite a bit up in altitude as we go along. So what we're going to see is more of a straight line like this. So once you have your tripod set up, shoot some frames of the landscape before the eclipse starts. And if possible, before the sun gets too high and too bright. You also may want to do the same thing on the back end of the eclipse when the sun is low in the west and out of your frame of view. So that gives you the landscape image. So how do I get these in here? Well, I'm going to set up the camera to take partial eclipse images through a solar filter. Probably about 5-minute intervals will work really well. Then when a totality comes, you're going to want to pull that solar filter off and take multiple images at different exposures. That does two things for you. It gives you the corona picture that you can then insert in the center here, but it'll also give you a picture of your darkened landscape. It may be that that looks really good to you, and that might be the shot you want to put together. That's a kind of a style issue, and me being a nightscape guy, I very likely might do that. So if you have the opportunity, plan your image ahead of time. You want to look for a good landscape if you can, and use kind of the rules of thumb for landscape photography, rule of thirds, foreground elements that are going to be interesting, and draw the viewer's eye into the landscape. Maybe a person when you're shooting those base images. You can also use complementary shapes or leading lines to a river that curves into the scenery, that or a road, that sort of thing. That's just good practice for landscapes. Once you've got the photos, and you're going to have in the neighborhood of about 40 or 50 camera raw subframes. I'm just going to walk you through the steps here, and I apologize. I realized I was when I got into this that for me to go through this step by step and show you was going to take way more than the time I had here. So making a commitment to y'all. If you want to get a hold of the resources, if you give me a couple of days next week, I will have a sequence for Photoshop to show you how to do this. But basically, you take all of the partial frames into Photoshop, and Photoshop works in layers. I've got an image of the eclipse photo I did to demonstrate that. You put the earliest sun subframe into the first Photoshop layer. You add all of the others in order that they occurred in layers above it. And then for all of the layers except the first one, you change that. Photoshop has a thing called a blending mode. And what that does, when I have two layers next to one over the top of the other, it will evaluate both layers, and then depending on the mode you have set, it will blend the two layers in different ways. For the lighten mode, it looks for the brightest, whichever of the areas in the two layers is brighter, and that's what gets passed through. That's what you will see on the screen. What will end up you can save as an image. So layer lighten blending mode works. Once you've got them all the way you like them, save the Photoshop file. You collapse all of those layers into one, and when you do that, you get the full line of partially phases, and then you save that as a TIFF file. And the reason you use a TIFF file, it's a 16-bit file. It's much better for further processing than the JPEG file, which only has 8-bit depth. Okay, so step 2, you load your, oh, that's supposed to be and. Sorry for the, you load and adjust your Corona shot to taste with camera raw. Okay, you're going to, if you've got multiple ones, we'll talk about how to deal with that later on when I talk about imaging the Corona. But basically, you are going to blend those subframes in a way that gets the full range of brightness in the Corona based on the different exposures you use. And I do have an example of that down later on. Once you do that, you flatten the image, you save that Corona image as a TIFF file, and then in step 3, you actually blend the Corona shot into the partial phase shot. You load those 2 TIFF files with the Corona phase on top of the partial phase TIFF, and then you end up using what's called a layer mask on the Corona phase shot. And there's a way to make a selection of the Corona phase layer. It's called highlights. It will select all the bright areas in it, and then you push a button and it turns it into a layer mask. And then you have to remember, layer masks are black or white or a shade of gray. White lets things come through from the bottom layer. Black conceals things in the bottom layer. So, I'm sorry, wrong way. White reveals things in the top layer. Black conceals things in the top layer. Sorry about that. So what you want to do, normally you will have a white selection on a black selection on a white background. You want to invert that, and there's some adjustments you can make it for a smooth insert. And now all of a sudden, the image on your screen will show the Corona phase in with all of the partial phase shots. You save that Photoshop file, flatten the Eclipse sequence image, and then save that as a TIFF file. Step 4, you blend the landscape image and the Eclipse phase images together. Again, you're going to use the 2 layers. You're going to use a layer mask similar to what we did in step 3. The big difference is, though, because the Corona has a black dot in it, you're actually going to have to paint that black dot so that it shows through onto the paint that black dot in the layer mask so that it comes through as the black center of the eclipse on the landscape image. So you basically save the Photoshop file, flatten the image, and then you can save the whole thing as a JPEG. And that gets you to, let's go, that gets you to this point, except we'll have the Corona right there. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. Once I have the detailed step-by-step images together, I know it'll make a lot more sense. So you can also take a single image, whoops, for your total selfie. You can also adjust that with your favorite raw image processing app. I just popped it into Adobe Camera Raw to give you an idea of what that is. And again, this is a different image that I had, and it basically, you adjust the exposure, etc., and you get it to where you want, where you like the look of it on the screen, and then it's into Photoshop, and you can export it as a JPEG. So, okay. So most of us, take a deep breath here. It's pretty cool to do a wide field image, but if you're like me, I was very motivated to do the Corona close-up image, and there are a lot of similarities, but it's just a bit different, and so I want to spend some time to go through that all with you, and hopefully at least give you an idea of what it's going to take to do that Corona image. All right, so so step by step through here, and we're going to talk equipment as well as how to shoot the image and how to process it. Come on. Okay, there we are. So again, just to remind you, this is the setup that I had with the 2017 Eclipse approach. I was trying to do something very technical with the telescope, and that is I was trying to image around the sun so that I could actually the Astronomical League for the 2017 Eclipse had a special award for solar eclipse observing. That if you were able to go through the steps to recreate how Einstein's theory of relativity was validated in 1919 by photographic means, then you would get the award. So that was what I was trying to do over here. Unfortunately, that all went awry. This camera here, sitting on a star tracker, it's actually a camera and a telephoto lens. It's the Scioptron Skyguider Pro with a rough polar alignment, did a really nice job of tracking the sun for the full 4 hours. And as I mentioned, we had 2 minutes and 20 seconds of totality. The lens was a Canon 300 millimeter f4, and my good old, at the time, my Canon 70D, which is a crop sensor camera. And I was very, very happy with this outcome, to be honest with you. And it may not be as good as all of the professional eclipse chasers, but it's sure not far off of what they got. So, what are you going to need to? What equipment are you going to need to do this kind of an image? You're going to need a camera and a telephoto lens, or a telescope and a camera with the correct adapters to hang the camera off the back of the telescope. Obviously, solar filter, some sort of an interval timer, or Eclipse automation software. What's really cool nowadays is the new mirrorless cameras. The new technology cameras all have this. Even the lesser expensive ones now have interval timers built in. I still have a couple of cameras where I have to put an intervalometer on this, plug it into the camera to make that work. And what that does is it fires the camera on a given interval, and if you want a long exposure, like in the neighborhood of half a second to 30 seconds, or even if you want it to go for 10 minutes with the shutter open, an interval timer will do that for you. If you're going to use the camera automation software, here you're going to need a laptop computer, because both of these, the iOS device, you might be able to get it to work on a tablet, but it's gonna need to be pretty capable tablet. For sure, the one for Windows is going to need to be a window laptop or equivalent. To mount, you're going to need something to hold your telescope and camera and camera lens up. Some sort of a sturdy tripod, or either an alt-az mount or some type of a German equatorial mount. We'll talk about what these are down the line as well. And then this type of image is completely put together. You have to have an app like Photoshop or GIMP, which is a free version that's similar to Photoshop that's out there. It really requires the layering and the techniques that to put this all together. I forgot. I guess I put this already in here. But that Eclipse image I did. This is the equipment I use, and I did use a star tracker. And away we go. Sorry, I thought that was kind of a duplication. Okay, why would you use a DSLR or a mirrorless camera? Well, I hate to use the word professional grade, but most of these cameras nowadays, even the prosumer versions, have extremely capable processors in them, not only to control the way the camera works when it takes an exposure, but also for things like doing special things you can do. For example, a high dynamic range image in the camera without having to do it in external software, like we had to do less than 10 years ago. The other thing is that you can do a thing called automatic exposure bracketing. You can take 3 images automatically, push the shutter release, and bang, 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 you get 3 different images with 3 different exposures. One with that's darker than the exposure you have set on the camera. One that's lighter. And I'll talk about why that's important later on. They all have very fast download and storage now, and are easily controlled wirelessly or over USB. And unfortunately, as much as I've looked, while there are apps for your smart devices, your smartphone, your tablet, none of them actually control the cameras on those devices, and none of them will control a DSLR or a DSLM camera. They do great work for simulating the eclipse. They do great work at looking at your GPS and getting the timing down. They give you a great a warning. It's going to be 30 seconds till totality, 30 seconds at a time. Take your filters off, put them back on, that sort of thing. That's very useful to have, but that's not available. They're not capable of actually firing the cameras on your smart device or on a DSLR or DSLM. At least I've not found one. Why can't I use my CMOS Astro camera? Well, you kind of can. I mean, if you're going to do video, we need to face it. These Astro cameras now are using the same sensors as our DSLR, mirrorless cameras. The big difference is where the cameras, the DSLR mirrorless, are controlled by an internal processor these guys have to be controlled by an external computer and software on that computer. Oh, well, why can't I, if that's the case, why can't I use the Eclipse imaging software on my CMOS camera? There's a big difference. The Eclipse imaging software assumes that they're going to take advantage of the smarts in the DSLR or the mirrorless camera that aren't in the CMOS Astro camera. And they're also designed to take Eclipse images, not the general astrophotography images of the software that is made to run these cameras on your laptop. So it's a bit of a mismatch situation that really means that really the best alternative, unless you're shooting video, because these do very good video as well, you're really going to need to be into a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. So with that said, you also need to know what focal length do I have to get a good image. And what that means is if I have a telephoto lens on a 400 millimeter focal length on a full frame camera, that's the black numbers, it's going to be a little dot in the middle of the frame. For a crop sensor, this is what it would look like with a 270 millimeter camera. So really, to get an effective image, you want to at least fill up about half of the frame. So somewhere between with the Corona, so somewhere between 500 and 1,000 millimeters is really a good range of focal length for a full frame camera. Somewhere between 300 millimeters and 600 millimeters for a crop sensor camera. Now, I want to remind you, I was using a 300 millimeter telephoto lens to get my image, but I also had a crop sensor camera. The Canon 70D I had was a crop sensor camera. So it actually fit the bill pretty well. And this goes for telescopes as well. Okay. So if you've got, there are a lot of folks out there that get started, and it's a great telescope. You get a 6-inch Miss Cassegrain on an Altaz mount. Can I use that particular telescope with a filter to do my Eclipse image? Well, the problem is a 6-inch SCT has which is a 150 millimeter diameter objective, or actually the mirror's 150 millimeters in diameter, but it's f10, which means you're going to get 1,500 millimeter focal length out of your 6-inch SCT. Well, 1,500 millimeters on a full frame camera, maybe you could do it, but the problem is that this telescope is not actually designed for such a big camera, such a large sensor on the back of it. So you're going to end up with what's called vignetting. You'll see the very center of it nice and bright, and then the outsides of the image will drop off very dramatically. So you may not get this whole corona. See how it fills the frame there on a full frame camera? It may be so dark out here that you really can't use that. So I really would recommend, if you're going to use this, get a focal reducer and try it out with your camera. But you can test it out on the moon and see what you get. If it doesn't vignette so much that you can get a lot around the moon itself, you may be able to use it. If it were me, and if you have a choice, I would go for a smaller refractor telescope in the 70 to 90 millimeter objective lens range. These are also scopes that you can use later on if you're going to go into astro-imaging. If you want to just turn around and sell them, this is a sweet spot. These sell very well, and they hold their value pretty good in the resale market. So which you use, a telephoto lens or a telescope? Well, if you already own one or the other, and it's focal length that you're going to need to do the job, then you're already set. If not, and you have to acquire either a lens or a telescope, you need to decide what you want to do with that after you get your eclipse image. Are you going to continue to use that telescope to do visual work? Are you going to continue to do that, use that scope to do astro-imaging? Maybe it's worthwhile buying the scope. Well, if you're really a camera guy and you're into landscape photography and wildlife photography, adding a nice telephoto lens to your bag is that's a pretty good thing, and you might even be able to get your spouse to agree to it if that spouse comes with you to the eclipse and is so blown away over totality as my wife was. She thought I was nuts to start with, and then got very emotional during totality. It has that effect on a lot of people. So you might get a pass on buying a nice new telephoto lens. Who knows? Mounts. Which one should you to use? Well, you have it's actually two major alternatives: an alt-azimuth mount or a tracking mount, or which either is a German equatorial or Star Tracker, which is actually a specialized version of a German equatorial mount. And we'll talk about which one and why here. What's the best mount for you to use? Well, if you've got one already that will get the job done, by all means, use it. You don't have to go out necessarily and buy a brand new mount just for the image. For the eclipse image. Again, you might get a pass for it though. I don't know. I might try that again. Try that tactic again this time around. And again, I might not. I don't know. Your mileage may vary. So an alt-az mount. What does that mean? What does this mean? This alt-az mount. The celestial sphere is it's just that, it's a sphere, and you can get to any point on it because there's no distance involved by going up in altitude and then north, south, east, west in what's called azimuth. So you can get to a spot on the an object on the celestial sphere just fine that way. And if the mount is set up to track, it actually moves in altitude and azimuth simultaneously, and it can keep that that image, whatever that what object centered in your field of view. That's a good thing. You want to be able to look at these objects a long time, and keeping it in the field of view is a very good thing. The difference, though, is for photography, because we're on the Earth is basically a sphere, and we're on the surface of that sphere. As we rotate, the sky looks like it's going in the opposite direction. Because we're on a sphere, it also tends to the field of view will actually turn it rotates as well because our angle keeps shifting, and the object will appear to rotate over time when you look at it. So you may start out with a crescent moon, nice, or a crescent phase of the eclipse, nice and C shape. After an hour, it may be C turned on its face. Okay, that's the idea of field rotation. It's not bad. It can be adjusted with. You can adjust that out in your image processing, or you can just run with it because you got the phases. Okay, these are German equatorial mounts. Both of them. This one's a pretty simple one. It's a kind of a push to with a clutch, but it has motors attached. The motor for the RA axis is on the other side, but that's a worm gear there, and this is a motor with a worm gear here. So these rotate around this way on the right ascension axis, and then this one rotates this way. It's not a plane; you can't really see it, but this will move. This face will move towards you or away from you as the declination axis rotates. Again, the idea is we're on a celestial sphere, and we're looking at the celestial sphere, and just by the way things are done in astronomy, it's kind of historical. The celestial sphere is gridded out with a thing called right ascension, which is east and west, declination, which is north and south. So you have an XY system there. The German equatorial mount, once it's polar aligned, and that means that this axis is parallel to the north celestial pole or the celestial pole. This will just rotate, and the rotation will match the rotation of the Earth. You can also get these with GoTo. I should have mentioned in the previous slide, this is actually a GoTo alt-az mount. This really is nice because it sets itself up. It's got sensors, so you just plop it down on the ground, turn it on, and it does a little dance, and it knows where north is, and it knows how level it is, etc. So it's actually GoTo. This one's not GoTo, but it has a method for you to align it so that you can run it with a computer. GoTo. This one is GoTo. It's got a hand paddle, but again, you need to polar align this. You need to align this one with 2 or 3 stars so it knows where it's at. This one, you just need to align it on the celestial pole with a polar scope or a polar camera, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, as I mentioned, Star Tracker. Why am I mentioning a Star Tracker? Well, it's a German equatorial mount. Kind of a modified design, same idea. I actually took my eclipse photo on one of these because I had a second German equatorial mount that I wanted to take with me to Wyoming, and the doggone thing went on the fritz about 6 weeks before we were ready to leave, and I was not going to be able to get it repaired and back in time. So I went out and spent the money on a Star Tracker, figuring I could put my camera and my telephoto lens on it, and it should work out just fine. The camera and telephoto lens weighed less than the payload rating for the device. So again, do you want a Star Tracker or a German equatorial mount? If you want to use an equatorial mount, now again, that depends. If you think you're going to get heavily into astrophotography, I would suggest you get a German equatorial mount. It's more expensive, but it's going to serve you better for astrophotography. If you want to think you might want to do some really nice wide field images of the Milky Way, 135 millimeter to I've actually used my 300 millimeter lens on this and done some pretty good stuff with it. So you can do astrophotography with it, but it's kind of limited. So again, what do you want? What is it that you want to do? These are also good for shooting nightscapes. I do shoot a nightscape with I have this one now, and it does a nice job. It helps with nightscapes, which are Milky Way wide field Milky Way images. I've already kind of pointed this out. I bought this one for the Eclipse and then gave it away after I won this one as a door prize at Okie-Tex in 2019. So again, I've already talked to this. I won't repeat it, but star trackers are good for. You can use them after the eclipse. They're also not all that expensive compared to a German equatorial mount. You can purchase tripods that work with them from the manufacturer, or that'll also work on a photo tripod. I actually have a astro tripod that you accumulate stuff over the years that doesn't get used anymore. Can I sell it? Can I give it away? I had a lightweight astronomy tripod that I modified to give it the 3/8" threads, and it works great. The thing you want to make sure is photo tripods, all of them. If you're going to take the head off, you'll find a 3/8" or maybe a quarter, but usually 3/8" threaded attachment. But it'll also have grub screws that are put in from the bottom so that your tripod head is stable. If you're going to use a star tracker, you're going to need to polar align it. A good idea is to put one leg pointing north. It makes the polar alignment easier because you're going to point the star tracker in that northerly direction, but it also, you can get in with the other legs spread, you can get closer to it, you can get everything done without kicking the tripod leg after you spent 20 minutes getting your polar alignment done, which is, when you're starting out, invariably you're going to do that. You're going to get everything polar aligned, and then the cat's going to run through, and you're going to bump into it, or there's all kinds of stories. If you need to add stability to your tripod, a good trick is to get a full gallon water jug and tie it off underneath the head of the tripod, so it adds some weight and it stiffens the tripod up. Keep the tripod legs as short as possible. Before you set up, whether it's a gem or a star tracker or an alt-az mount, around here, make sure you check for fire ants before you set up. The worst thing is to get everything set up and realize you're standing in an ant pile and you got to move everything. So what should which is better, an alt-az or an equatorial mount? The good thing about an alt-az mount, you may already have one if you're a visual observer. A lot of people have the 6-inch SCTs that can be used as an alt-az mount for a different type of telescope. No polar alignment required. It's not, you're not really going to, if you got to go out and buy it when you plan to go into astrophotography, not recommended, because it's really not the best thing for astrophotography because of the field rotation we discussed. If you have a gem, if you're already an astrophotographer, guaranteed you've got one already. If you want to go into astrophotography, this is a good entry point to get that gem. No field rotation, but it does require polar alignment. We're going to talk a little bit about polar alignment here in a minute as well. Just a few other recommended accessories that you're going to need to use. Things like battery tanks, intervalometer, red tape for various things. Okay, I'm showing red lights here. I actually made this for a Star Tracker presentation. But if you think about it, if you're setting up and polar aligning at night for the eclipse the next day, you're going to need lights. This particular thing is a battery eliminator for a camera. It actually plugs into this power tank. So I have a camera that doesn't have a flip out viewfinder, screen. You can actually get a nice 8-inch monitor that runs on 12 volts, and the camera will display on it. Sure makes bending over easier when you're trying to see what's going on. You can also, a lot of cameras nowadays, you can remotely connect them via wireless, whether it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and that saves your neck as well. You also want a decent magnetic compass. I know most smartphones have apps that'll give you the directions. I've found they're not nearly as reliable as a good old Boy Scout hiking compass or similar. And then this is, I've set this up, this red dot finder, so I can put it on the camera and know where I'm pointing the camera. Everything goes into a nice camera bag I had, and it makes it very nice to transport. And any rate, the only thing I'll add here is if you're going to use painter's tape, I didn't mention you can tape, once you have your lens focus, you can use that tape to hold the zoom and the focus rings in place. You can also, on a DSLR, since it's got a mirror, you can put it over the viewfinder just in case to keep stray light out from getting into the sensor. Velcro strips and long twist ties are really handy for managing things. It doesn't matter what you're doing in astronomy. You're going to have some wires hanging here and there. You want to make have a way of tidying those up. And then again, I can't stress this enough. Before the eclipse, rehearse setting up your camera setup, getting it polar aligned, and focusing it before you head out to the eclipse. So we're going to go fairly quickly through a few things. You're going to need to know how to polar align, and there's two ways to do this. A rough polar alignment can be done if you are in a public area and you can't set your equipment up, and you're worried about leaving it overnight. You're going to need to do a rough polar alignment in the morning of the eclipse. I did that in Wyoming, and if you if you practice it and you know what you're doing, you can get pretty close. The reason why you need to do this polar alignment, if you don't, your image the image will drift in your camera field of view over time. an accurate polar alignment. If you have the luxury of setting up a day or two before the eclipse, by all means, do this accurate polar alignment. We're going to talk a little bit about focusing, and then how long should my exposures be, a very little bit about automated imaging, and then I'm just going to show you a slide or two about processing these images. So I note we're at 8:30, and I'm going to go take this all on in about less than 15 minutes. So polar alignment, I'm taking my mount rotation axis and making it parallel to the Earth's rotation. The way you do the rough polar alignment, you need to get the right ascension axis at the correct altitude and azimuth of the north celestial pole. Well, how do you do that? You use a level. In the north celestial pole is if you're at 30 degrees north latitude, the north celestial pole is 30 degrees up up straight up from due north. The compass gets you to where due north is. Just make sure if you're using a magnetic compass that you don't forget to correct for magnetic declination. The magnetic field is not always correctly due north on the Earth, and there's a website that you can figure out based on your location how much you need to adjust that. You can see this is off. That's the direction it's pointing. That's the direction the magnetic field is going. Okay. I'm not going to go too much in this in the accurate polar alignment. If you go to astrobackyard.com polar alignment, he's got a great resource for teaching you how to do it. The main thing is you're going to find Polaris in the sky. You're going to either use your polar scope or even they make polar alignment cameras now. One way or the other, you're going to put that Polaris in a spot on a reticle or on a generated picture on a computer screen by turning the azimuth and altitude dials on the mount itself. So that's how you do it. Practice makes perfect. I can do this in less than 3 or 4 minutes now because I've been doing it for so long. Probably take you 20 or 25 minutes the first couple of times you do it. So we'll just go past this one. Use a phone app. If you're going to do the accurate polar alignment, there's several accurate polar alignment helpers for your smartphone. My favorite is Polar Finder, and it works with several different companies, Polar Scope reticles, and it really works well. My Skyguider Pro, which is the star tracker I have now, actually has a little longitude adjustment on the Polar Scope. When you use this polar alignment app, you do not do this longitude adjustment because the app knows exactly where you are, and it takes into account how far you are from a main longitude. This is Polar Finder and the different reticles that it has. You basically put it shows you where to put Polaris, okay, in the finder. And once you do this and everything's tightened down, you're good to go. All right, focusing. There's 2 main ways to do focusing. Although when you do a lot of astrophotography with a camera lens in particular, you can't use autofocus. You may be able to with a really bright star or whatever, but for the most part, autofocus won't work at night. So if your camera lens has a focus scale on the lens barrel, you can get close. And if you practice, you can get really close. Test it in the daylight. Focus on something a long way from you on the horizon, a cell phone tower, for example, and focus by eye, and then look at where this scale is set. And if you duplicate it, you're going to be pretty darn close to infinity focus. A better way is to use live view focusing. And again, this is manual focus. You turn off image stabilization on your lenses as well. And this shows a star. Well, I'm going to find a bright star in the live view focus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on it 10 times, and then I'm going to focus the ring, the focus ring, back and forth to make this the blob of light the smallest as possible. And once I get it there, I'm going to leave it taped down the focus ring. For the partial eclipses of the sun, partial phases of the eclipse of the sun, you're going to want to have your solar filter on. So focus on the edge of the sun. You want that to be as sharp as possible, and you can tell when it's out of focus and when it's in focus by looking at the edge of the sun. Okay. Out of this slide, the biggest thing I would tell you is during a full moon and in town, practice, especially if you're going to be doing the eclipse. Focus on the full moon. The other beautiful thing about this is that you can get some idea about what your exposure values are going to be. You have to remember, though, that the moon is much dimmer than the sun, and you got to do a little bit of math to get there. Okay, finally, how long should my exposures be? Fred Aspenak, Mr. Eclipse, on his site is and the URL is for this down here. Has a really nice eclipse exposure guide, and what the way you do this is you pick the ISO setting, which is the gain of your camera, and that you're going to be set at, the F number of your lens or your telescope, and then you just go straight down the table underneath here to determine what shutter speed that I have to have for the different partial phases and for the different corona phases. Okay, so what does this mean? This is with a 4 or 5 neutral density filter. Again, he's giving you a head start on figuring out your exposure for your partial phases. What you can do very easily, take your for the partial phases, put your solar filter on your camera, on your lens that you're going to use, go outside in the sunshine, find the sun in your viewfinder, focus it the way you would do at the eclipse, and then change your shutter speed to different shutter speeds and see which ones you like. That's probably going to be right about where you want to be for your partial phases of the eclipse. You're also practicing ahead of time how to take that image, those partial images. So strongly recommend that you do that. It'll help you get the exposure for the partial phases down properly. This table works very well for once the solar filter comes off, for the chromosphere and any prominences. those are going to be very fast shots because they're very bright, and you don't want to overexpose them. As you get into the corona, this is how many solar radii, how far out from the actual limb of the sun am I going? Well, the brightest part is closest to the sun. You want to image that because there's nice detail in there that if you overexpose it, you're going to lose the image detail. If it exposes until everything's at the absolute whitest value that your camera can record, you've lost any detail that might be in those areas on the sun. The same thing as you get further out from the sun, obviously that corona gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, so your shutter speeds need to increase quite a bit. And again, this table is very good for using it. It takes 9 separate exposures at different shutter speeds in order to get the full corona captured, so you can assemble an image out to 8 solar radii. Okay. Automated imaging. Again, if you're going to do this, I very strongly recommend that you go out in the next few days and get one of these programs, depending on which operating system you use. Eclipse Maestro is a little newer program. It runs only on iOS. It looks better than Eclipse Orchestrator, which is what I used. I got the Pro version, and believe me, it's very much worth every dollar you pay for the Pro version. Eclipse Maestro is donationware. If for personal use, he's not going to charge you, but at request a donation. But if you're going to use it commercially, then this is what he says it's worth. So this is a screenshot from Eclipse Maestro. Most brands of cameras, you can actually run an S-Big Astro camera on it, but I noted that none of the new CMOS cameras are on there. You can control up to 4 cameras at a time. It has a full Eclipse simulation and full scripting support. What these do, you set up a script that runs your camera at different shutter speeds and to capture all those images. Same thing for Eclipse Orchestrator Pro. It can also run multiple cameras. You just have to make sure they all behave together. And it has a full scripting support for it. So I want to show you real fast a couple of processing slides. I promise you I will put much more detailed section in the share file. This is just taking one single raw image and putting it through a kind of a basic raw photo editor. This was the best I could get it to. I used Luminar 4. There's the exposure settings I use in Luminar, just so you know what's going on. But mostly I'm doing highlights and shadows and a tone curve here. I also have a program called Aurora HDR. Remember, we took a bunch of 9 different images at different shutter speeds in order to put together the full Eclipse image. Well, that's called high dynamic range processing. Used to be that the only way you could do this was in Photoshop, the way I did my image in 2017. Now they have AI-based programs that do this for you, and they're great for landscape imaging. So I figured, what the heck, I'm going to drop this all in Aurora and see what happens. These are all of my 9 images at the different levels, okay, at different exposure levels. Hit create HDR. and look at it, and I get a few changes to increase the contrast and bring out some of the faint detail, and voila, it looks pretty darn good. It looks pretty close to what I did myself in Photoshop in 2017. You may not be able to see it though. The one problem is that that it does leave some artifacts. There's some banding in here that the program leaves because it evaluates the image in small swatches, and apparently it doesn't do a perfect job of stitching them all together. But otherwise, it's a really good image. Photoshop, I'm just going to show you. This is my stack of most of my stack of layers. Again, I had the 9 Eclipse layers all the way up to here. I put the prominences back in on top to get them to come out better. And then now from here on, I'm adjusting the exposure. And then what you can't see up here is I'm also increasing the sharpening the details in here and increasing the contrast in the details. So I'll get into this in more detail and something you can collect out of the share folder. And then finally, what won't be in the share file folder is a really great resource I want you to look at. Alan Dyer is a well-known astrophotographer. He's really more of a nightscape and photographer and whatnot. He's got an awesome guide for $11 that you can download on everything. He takes what I did here and does it in 3D where I'm maybe 1.5D. Okay, well worth looking into. And in fact, one of our members, Bill Spazzeri, sent on to us a flyer from the Kalamazoo Astronomical Society. They're going to be doing a Eclipse series that starts in just a couple of weeks with Alan Dyer. Part 1, how to photograph the eclipse. December 15, part 2, how to process the eclipse. And and I hope what I'm telling you here stands up to a little bit to what he's doing. But I would tell you, if you are serious about photographing this eclipse, get the guide, watch the man on Zoom. Also on January 19th, the automated imaging. The two guys, one that did Eclipse Orchestrator and Eclipse Maestro, are going to get online and show you how to use their programs online. So there's the URL for the Eclipse series. And finally, the resources. If you will send me an email at edonselle@gmail.com, I will send you a link back that will allow you into the Dropbox file and give you the ability to download everything as well. What will not be in there is Dyer's Eclipse book because he's got it for sale. It wouldn't be right of me to do that. And if you give me a couple of days next week, I will have the image processing instructions with visual examples in there. And if I have your email, I'll notify you when I drop those in the Dropbox. So with that, thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you were able to get anything, get some use out of it. And I guess we've got some questions on here. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Don. That was, as always, a wealth of information. A couple of comments. Dawn Anderson, I think, had to leave, but she said, thank you for the wealth of information. Andre Salaveria said, that's a nice setup. I don't see any questions per se in the chat. So I'm just going to open up the floor. If anybody has a question for Don right now, just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hello,
yeah,
my name is Luis. I saw your setup. You have two mounts tracking the solar eclipse. Why not tandem telescope on the larger mount? Have you thought about it?
yeah. The lighter mount had just a camera and a 300 millimeter lens. The bigger mount had my 90 millimeter refractor, but it's a f6.7, so it's a 600 millimeter focal length. What I was hoping to do with that was what's called astrometry. So I took images of the area around where the eclipse was going to happen 6 months before the eclipse at night, so that I had all of the stars and the location of all of the stars that were going to be around the sun. And my intent was to do the same thing while the sun was in total eclipse. Move off the sun a little bit, take a couple of images, and to get the stars, so that I could compare before and after. What happened in 1919 was to prove Einstein's theory of relativity, is that they actually did that with the imaging technology at the time, which was glass plates with gel on them, and were able to compare them. And the gravitational field of the sun actually bent the light and made the stars, some of the stars very close to coming to the sun, appeared to move closer to the sun. They were able to measure those, and it was clear validation of the first one of Einstein's general theory of relativity. So I was trying to do that, and everything started going upside down on me. So I abandoned it and just went and looked at the eclipse, while I let the camera on the light tripod run with the Eclipse orchestrator. I had a pretty robust script in there for imaging, and I was fortunate enough to get everything I needed.
Yeah, I think we had another question.
Yeah.
There was
Luis, did that answer your question? Chris Menon, I don't know if Chris sent me a direct message.
Okay.
And he asked, do I bracket the images while shooting? You can do that with the automation software. You're actually setting up a script so that you run a series of essentially a huge bracket of 9 or 10 different exposure values, one after the other. Zip, zip, zip 3 or 4 times. And so to do that, you actually don't use the exposure bracketing in the camera. If you're actually standing there doing a shutter release, not doing it with the automation software, I would put the automatic bracketing on there, of an f-stop above and below. That way, you take one bracket 3 images, move the shutter speed slower by 1 f-stop, do that again, 1 f-stop, do it again. That would be the way I would do it if I did it manually. And then the other question, can I put a 2x extender on a 400 millimeter Canon telephoto lens I have? Yes, you can. In fact, I've upgraded my camera. I now have a full frame mirrorless camera and a 1.4 times extender that I'm going to use for this upcoming eclipse. Okay. Oh, okay, good. I see, Luis. I was able to answer Luis's question.
Okay. Were there any other? Do you have any more questions on your chat, Don? I don't have any on mine.
I don't.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right. Is there anybody else that wants to just come off mute and ask a question? Going once, going twice. Okay, Don, excellent. Appreciate it, buddy. I'll tell you what, I just want to share one thing with you all before we dismiss for the evening. So I'll be quick. Tomorrow, I just wanted to. Can you all see my screen? Don, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so tomorrow we have another topic on the eclipse, total eclipse, a once in a lifetime event by, I think his name is George Ellis.
George
Yes.
Ellis. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll also be having club elections. So if you can make tomorrow night, a lot of good information and make your voice heard. And with that, Don, again, thank you. I thank you all for attending tonight and wish you all a good evening.